As a certified B Corporation, we think a lot at Mission Partners about the companies we engage with and how they conduct their business and if they're aligned with our values. And when it comes to our company's investments and our 401k benefit, we were so happy to find Aspire Capital Advisors. And let me tell you, they have been a game changer. What stood out to me was their approach. From day one, they took the time to understand our vision to align investments with our values. They put people first always, and they showed us how even the little changes can make a big difference for our employees' wealth building plans. They helped us build a plan too, to support our vision for long-term company growth, one that feels right for us and our business. If you're a business owner looking for a true partner in your 401k or investment strategy, Aspire Capital Advisors is ready to help you build a plan for the future that reflects your values. Visit investwithaspire.com to book a free consultation today. They're ready when you are.
We talk a lot about leadership, but presence, that's where the real work happens.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Mission Forward podcast. We are right in the middle of this season 11 with just as many terrific conversations behind us as we have ahead of us. Today's conversation among them. Now, if you've listened to this show for a while, you know that I love to feature a different member of the Mission Partners team each season. And this season, I am thrilled to have our design director and one of my business partners on the line for a show about designing for impact. Anne Kerns is designer extraordinaire. She is the genius behind nearly every rebrand we have led here at Mission Partners, including our own. And I wanted Anne on this season because we've been talking a lot about perspective, how we look back and how we prepare to look forward. And the reality is design plays a very big role in shaping that perspective. I should say that Anne is more than our design director and partner, though. She is a natural-born teacher who has taught me so much. Literally every chance I have to learn from her, I love. She digs deep into the historical understanding of design. She helps brands make sense of their current and future brands. And she is more well-read than anyone I have ever met on the origin of fonts and the meaning behind colors. No joke, this woman is incredible. Like some people love shoes, this woman loves fonts and color, and especially red. And I love learning all about them from her. So today's conversation is both going to be informative and fun and hopefully a great big bright spot in your day. So Anne, I am thrilled to have you here. Thanks for being willing to share some knowledge and some fun facts on design on the Mission Forward podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for having me. I'm excited for our conversation as well.
Let's start at the top, right? We are right here in the middle of this season. We've been talking about hellos and goodbyes and the space between. And a few weeks ago, you said something to me that's sticking with me. You said, whether we're looking back or we're looking forward, what matters most is how we look at things, right? And design can be a great tool to help spark curiosity to look and to look again and to look closer at things. And so I'm curious what's sticking with you as you've listened to these shows so far. What have you been coming away with?
I've really enjoyed all of the episodes that I've listened to. I think I have one more yet to go that was just released last week. But the episode with Michael Pope and Elisa Pupko was so interesting because they were exuding a sense of curiosity as well as openness, being open to new things, new experiences. And I think that is actually something that's resonating. Michael Bolden also changing his position, his career path. That also to me is just really being open to new things. Actually, Lisa Snowden's interview was so interesting about that too, because she said that she didn't expect to be the leader of Baltimore Beat and the beat boxes. But here's an interesting thing. When I was listening to Rich Harwood's episode and all of the talk about community, I was actually preparing for a civic rally that I attended this past weekend. And the idea of community, while maybe it's a little bit overused, is it's really about us and how we can relate to one another. And I'm, as you know, a gardener. I love to grow flowers and vegetables and herbs. I also love to collect the seeds from what I grow. I'm not sure if that's a little bit of an OCD thing, but I enjoy keeping my hands busy and picking seeds. And so I have a lot of extra seeds, and I decided, no pun intended, actually, I should say pun intended, I wanted to help seed community. And so I made little packets of all of my extra seeds, and I brought them to this rally. And I had my sign on a sandwich board, but then I had in my hands this bin of seeds for veggies and flowers and herbs. And quite a lot of people, took some, because I was like, just please take as much as you'd like. And so it was just a way to share and to engage in short little conversations with my, geographic community. So people that I didn't know, but that were at this event.
I love that. And I love how Rich's ideas and his kind of call to action sparked that in you. You know what I think I'm really loving about this season is similar, that every season we've talked about community in one way or another, but community, this importance of designing and participating and building the community that you want to be part of, it doesn't show up without you taking part in it, without you contributing to it. So I love that you contributed by sharing something that's special to you, one of your skills with your community.
Thank you. It was also a way, I'm an introvert, so I'm really happy being at home. And so it was also a way to experience community in a way that was comfortable for me, because it was, almost like using seeds as a crutch, to be honest.
I love that. All right. So let's talk a little more about the things that you've designed, how you've contributed, and what design has done for you, right? Like how you've looked at life through this design lens that you've kept for so many years. And maybe just one bit of background for the team. Or for the listeners, I did a very quick opening at the top. Your background is so incredible. You have had so many different types of experiences. And when you talk about your design background, you often talk about some of the through lines that you've had that have contributed to how you look at the world today. Just give a little bit of that background, and then I'm going to go into my next question.
Well, I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland, which is somewhat odd for people who are in the design field. Usually it's a fine art degree, at least these days. And so I had a really well-rounded general education, as well as really deep dives into different aspects of design, because when I studied design, it was before computers were, everywhere. If I say that I used Adobe PageMaker 1.0 my senior year in college, that's a program that's not even in existence anymore, although Adobe obviously is. I come from a family of teachers, so I think that some of that curiosity is innate, perhaps, or was absorbed during conversations around the dinner table. My dad is a retired professor of anatomy. My mother was a home economics teacher and has had a master's of interior design. So education was highly appreciated and valued. And I never felt any pressure to, do anything other than what I discovered and wanted to do. So I have had a lot of curiosity. I did fairly well in school. And then I started to get jobs. I worked for a retail department store chain in the headquarters. I worked at a PR firm that was, I want to say it was apolitical, but it's not. It had the two leaders, one was a Republican, one was a Democrat. So it was
back in those days when that actually worked.
Totally worked. I have worked at a couple of different small design firms, and then I went out on my own. And I've also been an adjunct professor at George Mason University and the University of Maryland. So I like to share information. I like to, get information. I like to share information.
One of the things that you have both done exceptionally well here for our brand at Mission Partners, but for every rebrand I've ever seen you work on, is you use design as a connector, right? You don't sit in your office all by yourself and say, I'll see you in 3 months and I'll show you some ideas. You are really deeply hands-on, understanding that the process of design is community building in itself. And this to me is such a differentiator. With every designer I've worked on, you just have this slightly different way of thinking about the importance of design as the connector to community, the process of design as a connector to community. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, right? Design is a great tool for deepening understanding, and it's a tool for activating community. So talk to me a little bit about that, how you've used that and why that's so important.
I remember attending a lecture. I believe it was in the early 90s, but please no one quote me on that the well-known designer and illustrator Bob Gill gave to an audience of area designers. And he had an example that he said, if you're designing for something and you only have 1 hour, let's say it's a logo for a laundromat, go to the laundromat, sit there for 45 minutes, and then design for the last 15. Most people can't design a logo in an hour, but the idea being that you have to immerse yourself in what the problem is, the quote unquote design problem. And so that means observing, talking to people, being in the situation, because that's when insights can be uncovered that can help you design to be appropriate, whatever the most appropriate solution is. With my education, it was always sort of emphasized to me that design has to make sense. Every mark should make sense. Nothing is extraneous, nothing is decoration. Of course, sometimes decoration can be a reason. So I'm not trying to diss on decoration and how things look, because I do think that's important as well. But things need to make sense. They might need to reference a behavior or an audience or a product, a service, whatever it is. And so really involving yourself as the designer into the situation, but also involving the community, whether it's in focus groups, asking questions, or doing surveys, doing research. Some things, superficial research, are fine and adequate. Some things really require deeper research, deeper digging into what's going on there. Having things make sense, being able to answer the why. Why are these lines here? What do they represent? Or what should they evoke? Or what are they emanating, whether it's a rhythm or a stillness or a seriousness? There's so many things that can be communicated via design.
I'm going to pick up on that and actually tee you up to tell us a story in a minute about one of the clients that we worked on our rebrand for. But I'm thinking back to an interview that I listened to many, many years ago when Steve Jobs was talking about how he had designed some of the early Apple products. And he said, I've designed them where you don't need a user manual. You should be able to open up that box, know how to turn it on, and know how to set it up. It should be intuitive. And I think a lot about that when I think about your process for design, that the idea of making it make sense to not just you as the person who's maybe sitting in the executive director seat or the board who is guiding the future of the organization, but to make a brand make sense to as many people who are experiencing it, whether it's for the first time or for the 500th time, right? That it feels inherently right and natural, reflective of that brand as you know it. So it's that marrying up of that kind of visual brand experience with the actual real experience of how you sit inside that laundromat, for instance, right? And there's a real art to that you said can't just be sketched out in an hour. But I'd like you to actually tell us a little bit about what you did for one of our longtime clients, the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread, they had an opportunity to revisit a beautiful, historic logo that had a couple problems in terms of its use in digital. The process you took them through, I thought, was so fascinating. So tell us a little bit about that and how it matches up with that Bob Gill example you shared a couple minutes ago.
In late 2023, I believe that's when it was that we started the brand refresh process. And actually, I'm gonna say we did a brand refresh for them, not a rebrand, because a rebrand generally is called for when the market conditions would indicate, a problem. Maybe there's a reputational harm. Maybe there's an addition or subtraction of audience or of products or services, some major kind of change or challenge. That can be when it's appropriate to actually rebrand, start right from ground zero again. Whereas a brand refresh, I like to think of as more of an evolution. Very few logo companies have logos that have remained unchanged throughout their organizational history. And so it's appropriate to revisit an organization's logo from time to time, but there should definitely be reasons behind, why now? Why should we be looking at this refresh or evolution now? In the case of the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread, not only did the team, of course, address messaging and how they talk about themselves, but the logo was actually designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And it's a beautiful mark. In fact, it shows up in a lot of different places on the Wingspread campus, including in cement at the front door. There's a beautiful copper medallion. And so while it is a beautiful mark and a beautiful design, it had problems working as a logo in, the 21st century. It had a very complex configuration. It had very thin lines, which are extremely hard to reproduce well at large and small sizes. It needed something. There were also several different levels of typography that had been added over the years. And so each line had a slightly different treatment or, in fact, different font. So my suggestion was that it would be appropriate to revisit the logo and explore what might be possible. And so we went through quite a wide array of research, including looking at peer organizations, looking at their logos, their visual identity. And what we ended up with in a collaborative manner was something that was simplified, but yet maintained the same footprint. I've used that term, in fact, with mission partners, brand refresh as well. So it's not that it was a complete change and totally different. It had a lot of elements that brought over, and it was a great process. But the turning point for me was when I accompanied some of my colleagues on a focus group trip actually out to the property. And not only did we get to hear from community members, staff members, leadership, family members even, but experiencing the property, experiencing the aesthetics of the Wingspread house, and even the SC Johnson headquarters in Racine, Wisconsin. It was so interesting to see some of the circular motifs and geometric designs that Frank Lloyd Wright had used at Wingspread also into some of these other instances, like at the research tower of the SC Johnson property. So I actually felt even more strongly after that visit that we shouldn't be throwing everything away and starting from scratch. But I came back to a tighter simplification of the mark. So it wasn't like a cousin, it was more like a sibling in the sense of the evolution. And the fact that it got approved is actually, the final test, because there's still quite a bit of not only history and legacy, but like family feelings. This started off as a property that was built for the family, and the family still exists. And so, it was really important to listen and to respect those inputs.
I love that story so much because I think it's a great reminder of people who are listening who say, I am part of a storied brand. How could I ever adjust a storied brand? And I think what you did through that example was a reminder that we can keep a deep connection to our history while also carving a path out to our future. Right. And so if we carry that idea forward, and I'm glad you started where you did, there's a difference between a rebrand and a refresh. That right now, I am hearing from a lot of folks across different sectors, different industries who are going through fairly robust changes inside their organizations. Now, that could be as a result of strategic planning, that could be a result of a merger, changing leadership, outside forces, changing the ultimate kind of focus of what the organization is and where they're going, and questioning, when is it time? When is it time to say goodbye to one and create space for another, even if it is just a refresh? So I'm curious if there are different questions that you like people to be asking themselves or considerations that folks should have about when the time is right to explore this moving from one brand to an evolved brand.
Well, I think that the time can be right anytime to ask those questions. I think going into the process with an open mind, without a preconceived notion of what the final should be, is really important. The times that we're in, i.e., the digital age, simply requires a different set of characteristics than, for example, the early 20th century, or even, pre-computer age, when not everybody had a personal computer, or in fact, a little computer in their hand that they can put in their pocket and take with them everywhere.
The thing I think you do so well is it's not just about, is the style right for the moment, but is it accessible to the widest audience possible? And I have heard you several times say, can we look at this through a color lens to see what does it look like? How does this logo, how does this mark convey to someone who may be color limited or color blind? Let's look at the font and the thin lines versus thick lines of the font and how that reads to someone who may be, again, kind of having limitations with their visibility. So you think a lot about accessibility as much as you're thinking about style, form, function. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Oh, absolutely. Design can open doors, if you will, and it can also shut them. So for sighted people, design is a primarily visual response. You look at something, you take it in, you might have certain feelings evoked by the colors that are used or the style of fonts or typography that are used. But design is about communicating. And so when we expand and try to communicate to as many people as possible, because we don't know maybe exactly where our audience might be coming from, it can increase the communication, it can increase the accessibility. And so colors that I maybe learned to combine in design school are very different than colors that have enough contrast, for example, to differentiate information for somebody who might have sight problems or deficiencies. If you think about a curb cut, that was something that was developed, sidewalks, when you get to a corner and the curb actually goes down so that wheelchairs can go through. That actually helps people who have temporary disabilities, like if they broke their leg and they're using crutches, or temporary quote unquote disabilities, such as actually, I guess the breaking the leg is a temporary disability. Contextual disability, for example, a parent pushing a stroller, maybe there's a kid on a skateboard, somebody on a bike. In other words, it was done originally for one population, but multiple additional populations benefit from it. And so if we approach the design activity not only from a perspective of community and who are we trying to communicate with and to, but also opening it up so that it can be available for many people as possible. I think the government, actually, the federal government defines accessibility as effective communication. So it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to make effective communications.
Mm, mm. That's a good reminder. And another good just thought to leave folks with who are listening, that if you're wondering, when will it be time for our organization to take on a rebrand? Well, sometimes it's just a matter of doing a bit of an audit on how accessible is your current brand. So how does your brand convey to those who may have limitations in their site, in their color, in any number of disabilities? And I like that phrase you use, contextual disabilities, which I think is an important way of thinking about designing for the widest group of your audience, not for the narrow expected group of your audience or known group of your audience.
Yes. In fact, one of the sayings, and I didn't come up with this, is designing for the margins, because the margins, that's where we all need to be
Mm-hmm.
in order
Mm-hmm.
to increase to the widest. And that goes for designing experiences, whether it's a healthcare delivery experience. I've heard so many interesting lectures over the years that talk about that kind of frame change, if you will. That when you design for the margins, you improve the experience for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Great. I love that. I love it. All right. So we're coming to the end, and I must ask you about this because it's the topic du jour here, which is AI, right? The implications of AI. And for people who are listening, including some who have reached out to me directly, who have said, "Hey, can I just use AI to design my logo?" And I cringe. And I know you do too, right? There is a lot of wonderful, wonderful ways to use AI. As you know, at Mission Partners, we like to think about it as augmenting the intelligence of the humans on our staff, not replacing the intelligence or the creativity. How do you think about, and how might you guide people listening on how to use AI in a design function?
Well, number one, it's really great for research. I think that it's a quick way to assemble potentially peer organizations if you're comparing visuals or how they talk about themselves, because it's scraping the internet. And so that can be a real benefit in gathering information, but that can also be a real problem, because if you use AI to design, it's scraping information from the internet. So there are copyright issues, there are ethical issues, there are originality, creativity, all of those things. A couple of years ago, when I first tried to experiment with that, making a logo, I had heard about, I can't remember now the program, but I had heard about a program that was supposed to specifically be for logos. And it asked a lot of prompt questions. And what it came out with was worse than clip art books of the past century, where you could, cut out a little picture of a plumber and paste that up to your business card if you were a plumber. And people knew, okay, you're a plumber. It looks like exactly what you do. These days, I think that it's really important to try to evoke feelings. I love to ask clients questions about, what adjectives would you use to describe how you want this to feel? What adjectives, do you want people to think of? Like, adjectives are just my absolute favorite part of speech. And so I think, AI is not doing that. And I'll say yet, because of course it could be coming, but even ethical usage is changing constantly. So I think it's important to be up on it, to experiment, but I don't let AI programs actually design for me. I pull out my pencil and my sketchbook and start with that.
Excellent. And it goes back to where you started, Anne. You talked a lot about observing and documenting early on. And I like that you started with AI as a wonderful tool to help with the research, to aid with the research. And then you put that aside and you pick up that pencil and you start to sketch. So
I will say that AI is also good for mocking up ideas that you come up with, for perhaps, whether it's 3D mock-ups, or if you're a UX designer doing the whole experience through an AI powered mock-up tool. I mean, there are definitely a lot of great uses, and there are big companies that have been using it for large name clients. A couple years ago, I think there was a Coca-Cola ad at Christmas time that was like the polar bears, and they just, they looked creepy. Because it you could tell somehow that it lacked the human involvement, the human touch. And since we are all humans communicating with humans, I think it's important to maintain that. I was listening to a video earlier today on YouTube, and it was a designer who was talking about how they used AI. And she specifically said, I don't let AI design for me because it's soulless. Making sure that your design still has a soul is important, although it's hard to describe. It's kind of like, that's one thing that you could say, you know it when you see it.
right. So, quick anecdote that reinforces that several years ago, you and I were working on a rebrand for a school, and we had received quite a bit of information from the team we were working with. They had given us a color palette they were really interested in. We were playing it out, and then we were testing that with students, right? With the primary audience. And several folks in that focus group said, we were using red in some of the mock-ups. So they said, red reminds me of the red pen, and that turns me off, right? Versus the blues and the yellows and the oranges that felt dynamic and actually warm and invited them in. We wouldn't have heard that ever through an AI function ever. But there was something there about the human connection, having people experience it and watching us, or letting us watch them experience it for the first time, that ultimately informed a beautiful and community informed design. So just something else to think about on how you use design as a connector to your community, not just something you do and then roll it out to your community.
Every color has both positive as well as negative connotations. And red, for example, is a very active color. It when humans are exposed to red, it activates the autonomous nervous system. It might make your heart beat faster. It might warm you up. It's a strong color. It's a passionate color. It's decisive, but it's also potentially danger and red X on the student's homework or whatever. And so that is what was resonating with those students. So you could name all the positive qualities in the world, and that's not going to keep them from thinking of a big red X. So another way that design can help not only bridge and inform community, but also communicate the right thing.
Right, right. And then ultimately design becomes the connector, not the divider.
Right. And there are a lot of AI programs that will come up with color palettes for you. I do not use those. I really love to pick my own colors. I had a whole semester class dedicated to color theory, which unfortunately most design schools do not do anymore, because there's just not enough time in the programs. But coming up with my own color palettes based on my knowledge of what the colors either represent or evoke, that's fun. I don't want to give that up to AI. That's one of the things that I really love to do. And then coming up with different ways to use those color palettes is also fun and reinforces whatever communication one is trying to get across.
We might do another episode of the show and just do colors with you, because honestly, Anne, it feels like it would be a party game for me to be like, okay, what's red mean? What's orange mean? And have folks understand and learn how much deep science goes behind the colors we choose, the colors we connect with, and honestly, how much our own personal experiences inform how we see those colors, knowing that the way we see them isn't always even the same way that we see them and experience them.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be such a fun thing to do. I have a whole bookshelf that's dedicated just to color books. And I've read, I'll say, most of them. I have an awful lot of books that I haven't read across my walls of bookshelves, but color is fantastic.
So let's wrap up with a couple rapid fire questions. They may be about color, they may not. But let's start first with, since we're talking hello, goodbye, space between this season, how do you like to say hello? Do you choose a hug or a handshake or something else? What's your go-to way to say hello?
I really try to read the body language of the person that I'm interacting with, because I don't want to make them uncomfortable. But I'm always happy to hug.
What is your favorite way to say hello? That could be language, that could be body language, or a symbol you make. What's your favorite way to say hello?
I like to say hi, H-I, with an exclamation mark. But in my head, I'm also saying bonjour, and saying hey, which is H-E-J, which is Norwegian or Swedish. I have some Norwegian background. And so sometimes I have a whole other conversation in my head.
Love it. Love it so much. What do you never leave home without?
Water. I am prone to dehydration, and so I will almost always have a travel mug of water or iced tea.
Thank goodness for you, Anne, and for not saying your phone, because it's nice to hear a different answer to that question this season. So thank you for that. Love it. And in this big game of life, what do you hope to leave behind?
The idea that when people remember me, they will remember the color red, because it is my favorite color. And quick story about that. When I was a baby, I got a book from my aunt and uncle, and the book was called Anne Likes Red. And it's a book that my family would read to me over and over and over again. And in fact, there was a reissue a few years ago, actually. I would say probably it was early 2000s, but there was a reissue of this book, and Anne likes red, 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 red. A blue dress, Anne? No, a red dress instead. And so it was a book designed for teaching kids how to read, because it only had 19 words, and it was a lot of repetition. But yeah, red is my favorite color.
So what I know about what you have imparted in me and what will stay with me forever is your knowledge of all things design, your love of design, your passion for design, how you convey that so much, where my daughter, when she was, when Kate was probably 6 or 7, she met you for the first time. And I remember, so you came over to our house and you were here for a while. We were working on a project together. And she said, I like her. And I said, tell me why you like her. I like her too. She said, she likes red. Because you had this gorgeous red hair. You were wearing a red cape. It just stuck with her. So we all love you, Anne, and you show up in the world.
That's what I want to leave.
Special way. I love it. All right, my friend, thanks for being with us today. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your knowledge. And we're going to do this again at some point. And I'm going to just do kind of a trivia game on Tell Us All About Color in its meeting, which will be a lot of fun. But for now, thanks for being with us and for all you do to help brands come to life at Mission Partners.
Thank you, Carrie. It was a pleasure to be here.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Mission Forward podcast. If you are inspired by what you heard from Anne today and are feeling excited about the potential of a rebrand or a refresh for your own organization, I hope you reach out to us and keep that conversation going. And if you're just generally interested in learning more about the episodes that we've had and the conversations we're having here at Mission Forward, go on back and check out some of those conversations that Anne mentioned at the top. The first episode of this season with Michael and Elisa is still sticking with me. And of course, that conversation with Michael Bolden and that great conversation with Rich Harwood. So much good content. We're looking forward to what's ahead. Thanks for being with us today. See you next time.
Thank you for listening today. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Positively Partners. Nonprofit leaders, when it comes to your organization's impact, the sky is the limit. But has HR become a limitation? As a leader in nonprofit HR solutions, our friends at Positively Partners are keeping the human in human resources with their signature service, Positively HR. Picture this. A fully outsourced HR provider who understands your unique needs and acts as an extension of your mission-driven team, freeing up your team's time and talent to focus on, you guessed it, moving your mission forward. With a 100% renewal rate among current clients and 95% of requests resolved within 24 hours, Positively HR saves you time, money, and compliance headaches. Let Positively HR lead on human resources so you can lead your mission forward. Say hello to a better HR solution at positivelypartners.org. That's positivelypartners.org.